On this edition of the NESN College Hockey Podcast, we'll give you our 3 stars of the week, recap the Women's Hockey East Tournament, and preview the Men's Hockey East Tournament. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the NESN College Hockey Podcast. I'm Dakota Randall, alongside always Patrick McAvoy. Pat, how are you?
Hey, Dakota. I'm doing pretty okay today. How are you?
Just okay?
Just okay.
I'm waiting for one of these days for you to be doing better than okay.
When those days come.
All right, anyway,
crazy podcast.
We're also joined by Logan Mullen back on the podcast after a 2-week, 3-week hiatus. Logan, how are you?
Dakota, I'm okay.
You're okay?
2 to 3 week too long hiatus, if you ask me.
I agree.
What have you been up to the past couple weeks? Anything good?
Not really.
No?
Logan, just
Jeez.
waiting for the call to come back onto the podcast, which I was listening. I noticed it declined without me.
Yes.
So when you said, hey, you want to hop on the podcast
That's not
this week,
true.
how could
I'd
I
say we had
no?
our episode of the year while you were gone. But
Up for debate.
regardless, you have been summoned. And what a great time for it, because we got a great show for you today. It's conference tournament time, and as such, we will focus heavily on Hockey East tournament today. We'll preview each matchup, give you our picks, sort of recap of what was a great regular season in Hockey East. We'll also give you our 3 stars as always, go over the polls, and all that fun stuff. But first, I want to go over the NESN schedule for the weekend. It all starts, and it's all Hockey East tournament, so it all starts Friday with Game 1 between Providence and BC at 7 p.m. on NESN Plus. Then Saturday, as part of our Super Saturday on the NESN Networks, ton of college action, including the Men's Hockey East Tournament. Game 2 between Providence and BC at 4 p.m. on NESN Plus. Then Game 2 between Northeastern and UMass at 7 on NESN Plus. Then Sunday, we've got a couple of the if necessaries. Game 3 between Providence and BC at 4 on NESN. And then, if necessary, Game 3 between Northeastern and UMass at 6:30 at NESN, or 5 on NESN Plus. I believe the 6:30 on NESN is a join-in-progress deal. But regardless, you can watch either game on NESN or NESN Plus, provided that it happens. So we'll get to all that stuff, all that fun stuff at some point. We'll go over all the matchups, break it down. We'll go over the Women's Hockey East Tournament. But first, I want to go over our 3 stars of the week in Hockey East. And I'm going to start with Jeremy Swayman from Maine. The Maine goalie posted his 3rd shutout in his last 5 games. Friday night, he racked up 48 saves as Maine picked up a huge 1-0 victory over number 18 Providence. Swayman has been a force all season and is a huge reason the Black Bears have home ice in the quarterfinals for the first time since 2012. He also has 5 games this season of at least 40 saves. Bruins draft pick. So he's been getting a lot of buzz lately. A lot of Bruins fans are kind of taking notice of what Swayman's been doing because he's had a great season. I've seen some people talking Hobie Baker. I'm not quite sure about all that, but regardless, he's been doing very well. Logan, what about you? Are you hyped on Jeremy Swayman as the NESN Bruins podcast host? Do you think Jeremy Swayman looks like the heir to Tuukka Rask?
Goaltending prospects are fickle, so I try not to base it off of that. But talk about a guy that's faced an absolute firing squad.
True.
This year. Like you said, what was it? At least 40 saves in how many games? 5 games?
Yeah.
I mean, that's if you can do that in college, and from people who follow like prospects a little bit closer than I do, by all accounts, he's kind of the reason Maine's even been,
absolutely.
Yeah, he's really anchored them.
And they have a strong defense, but I wouldn't say they have the most talented defense in Hockey East. They let up a ton of shots, a lot of zone time, and Jeremy Swayman has just kind of stood on his head all season. And he's one of the reasons I'm liking Maine in the Hockey East tournament. We'll get to that in a little bit.
Was that right?
That's a tease. But regardless, Jeremy Swayman, number 1 star of the week in Hockey East.
Speaking of goalies, up next, 2nd star of the week, Spencer Knight, BC. I believe he was also our 2nd star last week, and he kept the good times going.
Confirmed he was the number 2 star last week.
Way to mix it up.
Yes. Well, but deserving.
70 saves,
Deserved.
1-0-1 weekend. Almost single-handedly knocked UNH out of the Hockey East playoff picture. What I mean by that is they didn't make it in because of Spencer Knight. He had 47 saves Saturday night in a 3-3 tie. Career high, believe it or not. And he
I
has
very much believe that 47 saves would be a career high.
I hope so.
Absurd.
What I specifically mean by that is, he's done a lot of great things throughout his college career.
That's a good point. Yeah.
That 50 piece may be coming, maybe in the Hockey East playoffs. That's another tease. He carries a 9-game unbeaten streak into the tournament. Maybe we'll be talking about him next week.
Yeah, that was as a UNH fan, we talked about it last week. There were a lot of different scenarios that had to unfold or that could unfold for UNH to make it into as the final seed of the Hockey East tournament. And none of those took place because they lost and tied with Boston College. There was an opening, I believe, because Northeastern lost their first game this weekend to BU. So UNH still, if they won Saturday night and Northeastern lost, I believe UNH still would have gotten in. But that is not what happened. They eventually tied. I could have all that wrong. But regardless, tough season for UNH. I thought it started out with a lot of promise. They looked like an up-and-coming team. They had some really good victories. Had some times where they played down to their competition. But this was a tough ask going against the regular season champions in Boston College. So I obviously it would have been tough for UNH to pick up anything this weekend. But again, Spencer Knight was a huge reason why the Eagles ultimately prevented the Wildcats from getting into the tournament, as you mentioned, Patrick. Third star of the week, David Ferentz, BU. I set up all 3 goals in Friday's 3-0 victory over Northeastern and finished with a +2 rating for the weekend against the Huskies as the Terriers earned a much-needed split. BU needed to have a good weekend, again, with UNH not being able to do anything against BC. It's not like it totally mattered, but they didn't know that going in. So BU needed to play well, needed to at least get one victory over Northeastern, and they did that. And David Ferentz was a huge part of that win over the Huskies. And he's been a sneaky good player in the second half of the season as BU has really come on. He had a good bean pot, if I recall.
Sure did.
And worthy third star of the week. Okay, so now let's get to tournament talk, which is, it's that time of the season. And thank God, it snuck up on us.
It really did.
It always comes up, always sneaks up on you. We already have one tournament in the books. Women's Hockey East tournament finished over the weekend with Northeastern winning their 3rd straight championship after a 9-1 victory over UConn. Northeastern, one of the best, I think they're the 3rd ranked team nationally in women's college hockey, and they've been one of the best teams in the nation all season long. Won the Bean Pot too, and they've been dominant. They dominated again in the championship game against UConn. And Logan, you were covering this game for us. What did you think about it?
A pretty thorough.
Not much else you can really say.
Pretty thorough shellacking on Northeastern's end. And honestly, it was kind of just business as usual for them. I mean, the forwards and defensemen that had kind of carried them all season did just that against UConn. Was Skylar Fontaine there, who I believe is first team All American.
First team All-American, yeah. She's been a great player all season.
She contributed a goal or assist on 8 straight goals for Northeastern. And then some of their young forwards, and by young, I mean Alina Mueller is a sophomore, but she's paced them all season. Chloe O'Rard, another sophomore. Their top line is probably going to terrorize quite a few teams for at least another couple of years. And then Erin Frankel, their goaltender, had been the MVP of the tournament the last 2 years. So for her to, she wasn't tested too much by UConn, especially because the game was pretty much out of reach by the second period or so. It wasn't until a 5-goal third period that it really seemed clear that Northeastern had control, but even up until then, they were outclassing UConn. So
not a lot of high pressure saves or anything.
Yeah, I mean the 9-1 scoreline's a little bit jarring, but the fact that Northeastern ended up winning the tournament was not the least bit surprising.
Yeah, again, they were probably the best team in Hockey East. I mean, they obviously were, but all season long they looked like it. They looked like it again in the tournament, and obviously we'll have to see how the seeding plays out in the national tournament.
They have Princeton in the first round.
They do?
They
okay.
do. Yeah.
I wasn't sure about that. Okay. So I think I would take Northeastern in that one. But Princeton is very good. So I don't know. But all I know is I've watched Northeastern play a few times this season, including the Bean Pot, including that game over the weekend against UConn. And again, they're gonna if they end up going all the way, they're gonna have to face some very good teams. But just from watching them the few times that I have, sometimes they just look so dominant and they play so well as a team that it's hard.
They're so fast.
Yeah, they have a ton of speed. They get great goaltending, as you mentioned. Good veteran leadership too, and just it's hard for me to imagine anybody taking them down. But I guess expect the unexpected in the tournament.
At one point this year, they even went 5 straight games without giving up a goal.
That speaks for itself.
I think that's a Northeastern women's team record or something with that. But 5 games, I think that was right before the Bean Pot. That's unbelievable.
Right.
Yeah. They don't have any glaringly obvious issues.
No.
Their goaltending's fine. Even as good as their offense is, the offense can have off nights and their defense is fine.
Right. The only issue that could crop up is they face another very good team, right?
Yeah.
They don't have any real issues on their own team. The only issue could be another team is up to the task. So we'll find out.
This is March.
This is March. Yeah, John Rothstein. Shout out. Okay, on to the men's hockey East tournament. So, I mean, where to start this? We got 4 great matchups.
You're the host.
I am. All right. Well, let's start with the top seeded Boston College Eagles against number 8 Providence. We'll just kind of handicap it real quick. Now, the Eagles finished 24-8-2 during the regular season, 17-6-1 in Hockey East. The Friars finished 16-12-6, 10-11-3 in Hockey East. BC is unbeaten in its last 9. I believe they're 8-0-1 and have outscored opponents 44-15. Alex Newhook has been huge down the stretch. He's been arguably the best player in Hockey East in the second half of the season. Spencer Knight, who we've talked about a ton. These two teams split their season series. Providence really struggling down the stretch. They're now out of the national polls. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But on paper, it feels like BC should take care of business. They're definitely the better team, but I wouldn't put anything past Providence, especially a team coached by Nate Lehman, who is a friend of the podcast, guest early on in the season.
True.
What do you guys make of this, Logan? Do you have a take on this
Starting with me, I mean, it's a game that BC should win, right? They have responded well from the way that they played in the Beanpot, at least in the quarterfinal game or the semifinal. The way they kind of threw away the lead to BU. They have, I mean, the way Alex Newhook is playing, I mean, again, we just talked about Spencer Knight, right? Like, we know the talent level that BC's capable of. They're 5th in the nation. Like, it's not an accident that they're a top seed in this.
Sometimes they look like the best team in the country.
Yeah,
so.
right. And they're catching Providence at a pretty good time.
That's a huge part of it.
Right. So it's just kind of tough to envision, BC finding a way in any regard, offense, defense, goaltending, coaching. I mean, as great of a coach as Nate Lehman is, Jerry York is an absolute legend, right? So I would be very much surprised if BC found a way to lose this.
I agree.
And then to kind of go off that as well, Providence, like Dakota, you mentioned, BC is unbeaten over the last 9. Providence, 2-3 over the last 4, including they got swept by Merrimack and then lost against Maine right before this series with Boston College. So not looking good for them right now. I've talked about before how, I mean, my biggest thing is whoever has the hottest goal, he's probably going to win. And as Logan mentioned right there, Spencer Knight is that. So everything's looking like the Eagles. And then I really don't have – I'm trying to think of a positive thing to say about Providence. Like maybe they're going to win, but I don't think they're going to win.
Yeah,
Nate Lehman hockey's tailor-made for the postseason.
It is true. It plays into really in all of hockey. There are no easy outs. There's so much parity in the league that anybody can win this thing. They're and at the bottom of the standings are really bunched up. So even though Providence finished number 8, a game or two goes differently here down the stretch, and they're all the way up to number 4.
Well, and
so
it's not like the Friars don't have a history of playing well against BC this year too.
Exactly. Right.
That's fair.
We've seen it.
Yeah, we have, and they won a game earlier this season, and again, you alluded to it, Logan, and for me, it just comes down to these are two teams kind of going in different directions right now. And is Providence, the way it's been playing, at a point where they can take 2 out of 3 against arguably the best team in the country or top 5 team? I don't see it.
Consider me skeptical. Yeah.
So yes, consider me skeptical as well. Okay, on to number 2 UMass versus number 7 Northeastern. The Minutemen finished 21-11-2, 14-8-2 in Hockey East. Northeastern Huskies, on the other hand, finished 18-13-3, 11-12-1 in Hockey East. They kind of faded down the stretch. UMass had a strong season after winning the regular season title last year and going all the way to the national championship game, which they, of course, lost to University of Minnesota Duluth. UMass went 2-1-0 against Northeastern this season, including a weekend sweep earlier in the year. This is a tough one for me because
upset alert.
Yeah, I know you got a take on this. I guess I know you got a hot take for this.
I mean, the Huskies are. If you want to bring it back to the Beanpot, that's a battle-tested team.
So the late season fade by Northeastern doesn't concern you that much?
I mean, it does, and the matchup against UMass isn't great. But if there's any of these matchups that I look at here outside of the 4 versus 5 main UConn matchup, and I'm trying to pick an upset, I would say Northeastern more likely than not. Tyler Madden, Zach Solo, they have a good amount of depth up front. Craig Pantano has been pretty good for them this year as well.
I think he's the X factor, and you could say that about every goalie in any hockey game, series, whatever. It usually comes down to the goalie is the X factor, but I really think it's the case for them. Because I think when they're right, they can score with anybody, and they have enough talent. It just comes down to what does it look like in net.
UMass has 2 good goalies, but they're both juniors. Like Logan mentioned, Craig Pantano. This is his 5th year. He hasn't really been that far in the Hockey East playoffs before. I think maybe my freshman year. I think Merrimack might have made it to the next round, the second round. But Northeastern's an older team. They came through. They won the last game against BU. They came through and needed the most. I think this is going to be a big weekend for the Huskies.
Yeah, maybe that win against BU at the end of the season kind of put them on the right foot. Yeah. I don't think they were in any way, shape, or form scared of going into UMass in that series. With the big games they played in the last few years, that senior class, that team, I don't think they're worried about that at all. It just comes down to, are they as good as UMass? I think so. I would lean.
Talent-wise, they could compete.
Yeah. I'm leaning towards picking the Huskies too, just because I've seen them come up big in so many huge spots and big opportunities. I think UMass on paper is a little bit better. And again, this is a team that went to the national title game last year, right? So it's tough to kind of pick against them. But I'm going to go Northeastern as well. So, and I also like Coach Madigan to have his team ready for this.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a 3-game series if I'm going to predict. And I just like.
Okay. We can only hope.
I like an overtime in Game 3 and Northeastern to pull it out as they usually do.
Do you think maybe it ends as technically a tie, like the Beanpot?
It can't, but that would be interesting if that happened. It would be a plot twist.
Non-stop overtimes in Game 3.
Okay. On to number 3, the number 3 seed UMass Lowell Riverhawks versus number 6 BU. Lowell finished 18-10-6 in the regular season, 12-7-5 in Hockey East. BU finished 13-13-8, 10-9-5 in Hockey East. This is a rematch of last year's quarterfinal series, which the Terriers won. I think both of these teams flew under the radar this year. A lot of people overlooked Lowell, as they always seem to do, for whatever reason, despite, they had one of the conference and the nation's best goalies in Tyler Wall. And they play a game, I think, that's also tailor-made for the postseason. And BU, similarly, because they got off to that slow start, a lot of people overlooked them. But as they got healthier later in the season and that those freshmen started to gel, they had a good showing in the Bean Pot, and down the stretch they played well. I think they're getting overlooked too. I don't know who I'm going to pick. I'm leaning Lowell, but I don't know. I kind of want to. I almost want to pick the Terriers because I think they've been so good down the stretch.
From a pure talent perspective, I would take BU, but you already mentioned the injuries, and I think that we saw how much better they got as the season went on once they did get healthier, and the youth, just loaded with freshmen and more sophomores as well. But I think this ties into the youth a little bit. They're not the most disciplined team. And
right.
You saw it in the Beanpot as well, committing bad penalties in the third period, the things that were avoidable. And that's the type of stuff that'll kill you in the postseason. And the occasional offensive dry spells, again, against Tyler Wall, that's not going to help. So I think for as talented as BU is, maybe we fast forward a year and that says, BU's a shoo-in to get to the next round. I don't know if we're there quite yet. So I'd have to go with UMass.
Yeah, I'm also UML. BU enters the game losing 4 of the last 5, including a sweep against UConn, 1 against BC, and then obviously this last game against Northeastern. And then we've all talked about it, but Tyler Wall, I think he is he's not single-handedly, but he is what puts UML over the top right here.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think you two have both swayed me to go UMass Lowell. I mean, I know BU has played better in the second half of the season. They came on strong, but you're right. Like, especially at the end of the season, it kind of went the other way. That's true. And to your point, Logan, you wonder if a team that's this young, if their emotions kind of get the best of them. We saw it boil over a little bit in the Bean Pot.
Maybe the youth helps them.
It can go either way. Right. You never really know. So but I don't know. I think you both are right. I think this is a take care of business kind of series for UMass Lowell. And I think at the end of the day, they'll get it done. On to my favorite series or my of the quarterfinals.
Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. Even though I hate one of the teams involved, Maine. So number 4 Maine versus number 5 UConn. What? They're the UNH's biggest rival. I can't not hate Maine. Just saying.
Fair.
Let's move on.
Okay. No, it's fine. I'm sorry. I just number 4 Maine versus number 5 UConn. The Black Bears finished 18-11-5, 12-9-3 in Hockey East. Huskies, on the other hand, finished 15-15-4, 12-10-2 in Hockey East. UConn took 2 of 3 from Maine during the regular season, including handing Maine its only home loss of the season. That could be big, as this series will be played at Alphon Arena up in Orono. UConn is looking for its first win in the Hockey's postseason. This is the first tournament meeting between the two programs. Again, not a ton of history. UConn joined the conference in 2014-15. I think Maine has been one of the most underrated teams in the country all season long. They definitely don't have as much talent as some of the upper echelon Hockey East teams or upper echelon teams nationally, but we've talked about Swayman. I think he's playing out of his mind, and players like Mitch Fossier that give them a lot of great leadership. I got a feeling about the Black Bears this year, and UConn has played really well in the second half too. They got a ton of talent on offense, so it wouldn't surprise me at all if they go up there and win this thing. But something about Maine, the way they've been playing all season long, they just won't go away. And the way Swayman's playing in net, I just like Maine in this series.
Yeah, depth and or good goaltending gets you deep into the postseason. Right. And so it's kind of tough to pick against Jeremy Swayman with the way he's played. And as far as I'm concerned, too, UConn's had a few too many kind of ugly losses.
Agreed.
And they got rolled in the Connecticut version of their bean pot. I forget what they're calling it. By what was it, Quinnipiac? A couple of sort of listless showings. I don't know. It's just kind of hard to pick against Maine, especially with the way Swayman's played.
Yeah, I think it comes down to him.
I'll do it for you. I'm absolutely taking UConn.
Okay. All right.
UConn when I say absolutely, I don't really mean that. It's a 4 first 5. It's gonna be a great matchup. But so UConn enters this. They beat UMass a couple weeks ago. Swept BU a couple weeks ago. So you got that right there. Then to go along with that, UConn this season has just been able to find the back of the net. They've scored the second most goals in the Hockey East. They scored 71, second only to BC, who had 93. They did give up the third most goals in the conference throughout the year. But UConn, as you mentioned, Maine's been an underrated team we've talked about this year, but I think UConn is too. UConn kind of just snuck up on us. I think we looked at the standings a couple weeks ago, and we were very surprised to see. So this pick right here is mainly a lot of, I kind of hope that they win just because this is just, to me, surprising that they were here. And UConn, friend of the program, so I'm going UConn.
Yeah, again, it wouldn't surprise me. They're really talented. A lot of those Russian players, they clearly found good chemistry as the season progressed, and they started really playing well. Just the team as a whole kind of came together. So many parts on that team from all over the place. We've mentioned the Russian players a lot, but just, I think a lot of players that weren't really familiar with one another, and it just took a while for that team to come together as a whole. And once they took off, they really did. And they are a really good team. We mentioned it again. I think with Swayman in net, if he keeps doing what he's doing, it's going to be hard for UMass to go up there, or for UConn to go up there and take 2 out of 3. So yeah, I guess we'll address the semifinals next week and the finals the week after that. But at this stage, do you guys have a pick to win the tournament? I'm going Maine. That's
really,
yeah. My intrigue in that series is sort of my springboard to say that I'm taking Maine, and I think Jeremy Swayman's gonna really show out and take over in this tournament. And obviously, Maine's gonna have to pull off some upsets because they're not the best team in the tournament. But it's something about the way they've been playing this year, and I think Swayman's been playing so well in net, and I think we're gonna get the Bruins hype at the end of this tournament. People are really gonna get carried away and have some hot Tuukka Rask takes inevitably. But I'm taking Maine. Just, bold prediction.
I guess I'll go with BC.
BC. Okay, that's safe and soft.
UML.
UML. Okay. So we'll address this in a few weeks and see how it all goes. Okay. We don't have a ton of time left, but I do want to go over some notable games from across the country over the weekend. Omaha and North Dakota split. Minnesota Duluth, the 2-time defending national champions. They've struggled a bit this season, at different points, but they might be rounding into form as we head towards the postseason. They're looking for the three-peat. They outscored St. Cloud State 10-2 in a weekend sweep. So again, are the Bulldogs finding it at the right time? Denver ties them, blows out Colorado College. Ohio State sweeps Wisconsin, including a 9-1 victory. And my takeaway is what happened to the Badgers at the beginning of the season. I believe there was a series between Wisconsin and BC early on where we were saying, this could be a preview of a national championship game because Wisconsin has been so good, or is supposed to be so good. BC has so much talent, and it just didn't really go that way. Wisconsin, I don't know what happened. Similarly, Minnesota State swept Alaska Anchorage in an 8-1 victory, and the Michigan teams and a bunch of other Minnesota teams sort of beat each other up over the weekend. I'm not going to get into that. It was just the way that always is. So yeah, a lot of interesting results and a lot of great conference tournaments coming up. So if you're a college hockey fan, this is absolutely the best time of the season. And for the final time during the regular season anyway, let's go over the national polls.
Let's do it.
Cornell finishes the regular season at number 1, followed by Minnesota State, North Dakota, Minnesota Duluth, Boston College, Denver, Clarkson, Penn State, UMass, Ohio State at number 10, Bemidji State at 11, UMass Lowell at 12, then Arizona State, Quinnipiac, Maine at 15, Western Michigan, Minnesota, Northeastern, and AIC holding strong at number 20, Providence dropping out. Patrick, any takeaways from the polls?
So on the negative side, you mentioned it right there, Providence went from 18 to not ranked after we already talked about it, but got swept by Merrimack and then also lost to Maine. So tough time to be floundering a little bit. And then
No one likes to flounder.
no
Floundering Friar.
not floundering Friar. You're right. You're
It's
right.
alliteration. You can get a lot of that on NESN.com from Logan Mullen's
Shout out
okay
Logan
work.
Mullen. And then on the other hand, Michigan jumped into the polls. They're up to number 17 now after they swept.
Johnny Beecher had quite a goal. Sorry to interrupt you,
You're good,
Patrick.
you're good.
Johnny
Yeah.
Beecher had a great goal. Speaking of
Kid's
Bruins
legit.
prospects, what do you think, Logan?
Did you watch the goal?
I have not.
Goes his puck
I keep meaning to.
possession. His puck possession's absurd, and how quick of a skater he is for how big of a kid he is actually pretty impressive. But
Do you think
gets the puck at the end line, just dices up the entire Michigan State defense, goes around the net, holds on, makes his way to the top of the circle, and then fires off a wrister. It was one of the more impressive. Well, it's not overly flashy, but in terms of kids that can go coast to coast and snipe a wrister, all while cutting up an entire, Division I hockey defense, it's not bad.
And it's interesting because, sorry, Patrick, we'll get back to your polls recap in a second, but it's interesting because when the Bruins drafted him, if I'm not mistaken, a lot of the talk was, oh, wow, the Bruins pick another defensive-minded forward or someone that doesn't have a ton of offensive upside that's going to be good in their own end. How many times are the Bruins going to go after players like this? And people were sort of dogging Johnny Beecher for his offense. And it just, at least in college, it hasn't seemed to pan out that way. He's shown a lot of flash on offense.
He's shown that he has a little bit of a scoring touch. I would still say he probably projects as a bottom 6 forward, a bottom 6 center, but you need those guys. And if, you can get a little bit of offensive touch out of those guys, a la Sean Corrali, right? Good for 15, 20 points a year. Not a bad situation.
No.
But,
Pretty
I
good.
mean, I'm thinking a lot of people that are just ruthlessly bagging on Johnny Beecher hadn't watched any of them. Just saw
Probably
6'2", 200-pound, 18-year-old.
Yeah, and the
like,
little-
here
yeah.
we go again.
And the little scouting
Jeez.
report that says offensive touch could use some work or something like that, and then ran with it.
Oh, no kidding. An 18-year-old needs a little bit of work on
Right.
offense.
Go
But
figure.
maybe,
Don't
he's-
we all?
He's right. So he's been really good though. Maybe he's the kind of player. Maybe he takes off and Michigan makes some noise in the postseason. Who knows?
Yeah.
Sorry, Patrick. Go back to your
Just
your
to-
astute analysis.
They've won 4 in a row. Swept Michigan State this last week, and then the week before, they took down then number 18 Minnesota. One of the games was technically a tie, but they won in the shootout. But 4 straight wins, and they got Johnny Beecher. I was going to talk all about him, but you guys took that.
Oh,
You
sorry.
I'm just kidding. No, you actually wasn't. But but they have
It's the
him.
funniest thing you've ever said. In the podcast.
Pat Daddy's got jokes.
Yeah,
That's all it is.
yeah. Patty wisecracks. All right. Thank you for that, Patrick.
My
okay.
pleasure.
So we got to get out of here. I'm going to give you the NESN schedule one more time. The men's hockey's tournament starts Friday. Game 1 between Providence and BC at 7 p.m. on NESN Plus. Saturday, Game 2 between Providence and BC at 4 p.m. on NESN Plus. And Game 2 Northeastern at UMass at 7 on NESN Plus. And Sunday, if necessary, Game 3 between Providence and BC at 4 on NESN. And then Game 3 between Northeastern and UMass, again, if necessary, at 6:30 on NESN or at 5 on NESN Plus. The one on NESN is a join-in-progress situation. Remember, all of our hockey's coverage is brought to you by Rockland Trust, where each relationship matters. So I'm looking forward to the tournament this weekend. I know if you're a college hockey fan, you probably are too. We're all going to watch plenty of it. And I won't be here next week,
Whoa.
unfortunately. I am heading over to Ireland at the best possible time.
Coronavirus stack.
Yeah, it'll. I may or may not ever be on this podcast again. I may be signing off for the final time. I could cough myself to death in a couple weeks. And that would
might
be,
be for the best if
Now-
you step back from the old cast.
and that'd be unfortunate because I really want to watch the Frozen 4.
Don't we all?
So it'll be Logan and Patrick together next week. You guys ready to do this thing?
Oh yeah, it's gonna be a real meeting of the minds here.
It's going to be a real Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig 3-4 combo. stepping up to the plate.
That's an aggressive. That's an aggressive.
It's a complete
comparison.
apples to oranges comparison.
Well, hey, listen. If I'm
If you can dream it, you can do it, right? We'll do it.
if I'm quarantined in Ireland, I'll phone in.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. You
Yeah.
can host
I
from the
won't-
phone.
Yeah, I won't be here to spew my coronavirus germs all over the microphone, but I'll FaceTime in.
These are new mics too, so that'd be
Yeah,
a
that-
real
that would-
service if you got.
Got to
Be a
break
real
them in
shame.
somehow.
Oh goodness.
Okay. This is going off the rails. Let's get out of here. All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this edition of the NESN College Hockey Podcast, and we'll catch you next week. Thank you.